All right, let's play with PowerShell for some time and understand how you can interact with Azure Active Directory with PowerShell. You can create users, look at the users, not just with the user interface or the portal, but also with PowerShell, okay? So I've already launched PowerShell on my computer. So the way to launch PowerShell on your device is to just click on the start button and then start typing in PowerShell like that, and it will automatically show up PowerShell ISE in this pop-up. So you can either select this Windows PowerShell, which is more like a command line interface, but I always prefer using the interactive editor because it has a lot more features than the regular Windows PowerShell command line has to offer. So launch the PowerShell ISE so that way you can edit and write your own comments on the PowerShell, okay? So the first thing that you have to do is to make sure that you got Azure Active Directory modules installed on your computer. If not, you got to install it. The way you would install it is by just typing install hyphen module, and that's simple. And the module that you want to install is called as Azure AD. Okay, so I'm going to run this. If it is not installed on your computer, it's going to take a minute, connect to the internet, and then get those modules installed on your device. All right. Now I got this message, or rather say error message, which says that you got to have administrative rights to install this module. So what I'm going to do is open PowerShell one more time, but this time I will right click and run as administrator. Okay. All right, so this thing is ready for me, and I'm going to run the same command, which is install my module, install hyphen module, and the name of the module is Azure AD, right? It says not case sensitive, okay? You can just go ahead and make these upper cases just for aesthetics purposes so that it looks good, but for PowerShell, it really doesn't care because it's not case sensitive. Okay, I'll stop my talking now and hit this play button to see what it does. So you're going to pop up here. I'm going to say yes to all for this one because it's going to do some modifications to my modules and the functions repository inside it. So say yes to all and give it some time for it to settle down. We got a message that I've got the version 2 of Azure AD already installed, but there is a new version available which is called as 2.76. Okay, so if I want to install this new module or new version, I need to run install hyphen module again, but with a hyphen force syntax. So let's do that. I'll just append hyphen force to this, run it one more time. If you're new to PowerShell, then don't worry because as you've already noticed that it gives you the solutions right there. So if you're getting some error messages or problems, it tells you right there how to solve it, right? So you do not even have to search in the internet and find a solution for yourself. Most of the error messages in PowerShell have the answer right here. So make it a habit to read these warnings, read the error messages, and it will be really helpful for you in the long run. Okay, so now that the Azure AD module is installed, let's go ahead and verify. So what I'm going to do is get hyphen module and then type Azure AD. Now I can highlight all of that and hit this button. I do not have to highlight it. I can just put my mouse right next to the line 3 and hit that one. Do not hit this play button because if you hit this, all the lines all the way from 1, 2, 3, all of them will get executed. But if I hit this one, the smaller play button, it will execute just the line where the cursor is blinking. Okay, so I did not get any output here, that's fine. Next is to connect to my Azure Active Directory by using connect hyphen Azure AD. That's what I'm going to run. Again, just like what we did before, I'm going to hit this so that I get connected to my Azure Active Directory. Here, I got a login as a global administrator. Now, what is a global administrator account? I will navigate to the Azure portal and show that to you. So here is my Azure portal, okay? And then navigate to my main directory page and then under roles and administrators, all right? And then in the search box, I go ahead and type global. I got something called as global administrator. So anybody who is an administrator of Azure Active Directory will be assigned this role. So global administrators have full powers, full rights on Azure Active Directory. Okay. So for you to connect to Azure AD using APIs or PowerShell or CLI, you got to have permissions on Azure AD. And then being part of the global administrator role gives you full rights. Okay, so I'm going to log in as this ID, but keep in mind that you can add further users. For example, in the previous lab, we added a user called as Alex. I'm going to make him a global admin. Just say Alex and then select the user account and then add. That's how we add users to a role. So now what you can do, now Alex can use his set of credentials to manage, delete, remove the contents in Azure AD. Okay, let's see how that can work. Okay, so in this interface, I'll type Alex credentials, which is alex at rainingcloud.de. Okay, and then click on next. You know what the credentials are. There you go. Now I'm connected to Azure Active Directory with Alex credentials. Alex was able to log in because he's a global administrator. Now with this set of credentials, we can go ahead and create users, delete users, in short, manage users. So I'm going to get rid of all of this, start with a blank slate again, and then use this command called as get-AzureADUser. I would like to get all the users in Azure Active Directory. So I'm going to run that. And there you go. I've got all of these users in Azure Active Directory. So I've got them on my interface as an output. Okay. You can then use your PowerShell skills further to send them as an output to a text file or a CSV file, etc. That can be done as well. But you can also do further filtering here. So I can say -filter, and I want to see all the usernames that start with, let's say, A. Okay. So I'm gonna say starts with, okay, and then close the bracket, type given name, which is the attribute, followed by a comma, and then close the quote here, and then type the name. Okay, I'll just say AL. Anybody whose name starts with AL. I will close the bracket and also close the double quote. I'll go ahead and change this because this needs to be double quote and not a single quote. All right, let's run through this and see what happens. So there you go. I've got all the users that start with AL. So that could be Alex and the second Alex created in a different domain and then alpha as well. All right, let's go ahead and run through another lab activity here. Let's go and create a user account in Azure AD with PowerShell. So I'm going to clear this off from here. Okay, and start typing the command that will let us create a new user account. So the commandlet is new-AzureAD and then you got to type various properties. As you see, there are several properties of the user, like extension property, whether you want account enabled or not, what should be the age group, city, etc. So you can go ahead and start typing in each one of these, but we will go ahead and fill up just the ones that are mandatory for user creation. For example, a password, a display name, a user principal name, etc. Right? Talking about password, it's not recommended that you always pass the passwords in clear text in a script. It's not recommended at all. It's not a good practice. So we create something called as a password profile. Passwords are handled in a special way, and you cannot just pass password like a regular attribute. So this has to go through certain procedures. So what I'm going to do is get rid of this and complete that procedure to store the password and then go to new-AzureADUser commandlet. Okay, so I got to store the password inside an attribute called as, let's say, users password. Okay, and then I'm going to generate a special object which is responsible to manage those password profiles. So the type name would be Microsoft dot open framework in Azure AD, and the model is password profile. Okay, and then I'm gonna pass the password now, that the user's password dot password is anything that you think is complex for the password. So I'm gonna just type something here, let's say delta 98765 exclamation. All right, and now I will use the new-AzureADUser commandlet and then say that the display name of the user object is, let's call him Steve, All right, that's the display name. And now I'm going to use the profile password, or the password profile will be the attribute where the password is stored, which is in line number 2, $users password. Okay. I'm going to also give user principal name because that's a mandatory attribute. So that will be the name at the domain.com or .de. In my case, it is .de. So I'm going to say rainingcloud.de. That will be his user principal name. Similarly, you can add several other attributes like the last name, account enabled, disabled, the geographic location from where the user logs in or not, etc. So I'm gonna add, let's say, male nickname, and the male nickname will be, let's say, Steve Ford. Okay, so that's the male nickname, and I will stop for now and execute this line number 1 through 4 all at a time. Okay, there you go. Now it is prompting me for another attribute which says account enabled. You will get this prompt or a pop-up only when it is a mandatory attribute and it has not been declared in the new-AzureAD commandlet. Now, because I haven't declared account enabled here, I'm getting that pop-up. So I'm going to say yes here, okay? What is a problem? In the previous lesson, I did specify that when you get error messages, do not panic. The solutions are right there. So let's walk through it and see what the problem is. So here it clearly specifies that the problem is with the male nickname attribute and there's something wrong going on there. There's a special character between Steve and Ford, so I'm going to get rid of that and then execute it one more time and see what happens. Okay, so there you go. Account enabled. So yes. Now we got a message that Steve at trainingcloud.de is created and is ready. That's how simple it is. So first step is to go ahead and create a password profile, store the password profile inside that variable, and use that variable in the new-AzureAD user commandlet. Okay, let's go back to the user interface and see if that exists or not. Or we can just say get-AzureAD user, and if you'd like, you can use filter as well. But then looks like Steve is right here. I'll go back to the UI and verify this as well. So that's my UI. Go to users and groups, and then in the search box I'll type Steve, and here you go. My user account who is created in Azure Active Directory with the following user principal name is ready. Similarly, you can add users to the groups, assign all these applications, licensing, devices, everything can be done with PowerShell.